Today I am going to discuss about myasthenia gravis and pregnancy. You may be think why Dr. Dinusha tried to link those two abnormal topics together, myasthenia gravis and pregnancy. I also feel like that. Why I am trying to link those two abnormal topics together. But at the end of the lecture, I will show you the clinical significance behind the myasthenia gravis and pregnancy. Before I am moving into topic, anyone tell me who is discovered myasthenia gravis first? Yes, myasthenia and gravis together. Answer is wrong. Myasthenia gravis was discovered by Dr. Samuel. In 1877, one of the patients complained to Dr. Samuel, Dr. Samuel, with the repeated movement, I become so weak than the other patients. With the repetitive movement, I become more weaker than the others. Then Dr. Samuel asked, what that mean? Even I try to close my eye repeatedly. I become exhausted more rapidly than other. Then Dr. Samuel said, can you show me to me? Yes. Then patient started closing his eye like this. Initially, patient closed his eye nicely and rapidly. But with the time what happened is, the contraction power gradually diminished. With the time, contraction power gradually diminished. It happened in the short term duration. We also become exhausted with the time. If somebody asks to do something to us, with the time, with the 2, 3, 4 hours, we become exhausted. Muscle can become weak. But in this patient what happened is, with the repetitive stimulation, rapidly the muscle power become low. Muscle power become less. Then Dr. Samuel tried to identify the pathophysiology behind that. But he failed. But he said, muscle weakness is there, severe in nature. Muscle weakness is there, severe in nature. Muscle weakness is there, severe in nature when compared to other patient. When coming to Greek term, muscle mean myo. Weakness means sthenia. Severe mean gravis. Myasthenia gravis come in that way. When combine these two together, myasthenia gravis. Now I want to flex my left arm. To flex the left arm, what I should do? First of all, in the brain, the relevant area of my left arm should fire. Then that nerve impulse should come from brain to spinal cord level. From spinal cord to muscles. And then I can flex my arm. It will take very, very few milliseconds. Even just after thinking I can flex my arm. But now I am going to do in slow manner in order to identify the physiology behind that. I am going to flex my arm in the slow manner with the stimulation of the cerebral cortex. The area responsible for my left arm is, what is the area responsible for motor action in your brain? Motor contraction. Yes, anyone? Yes, very good. Precentral gyrus area is the one responsible for motor contraction. Postcentral gyrus area responsible for your sensory action. Sensory detection responsible area is postcentral gyrus. Motor contraction responsible area is precentral gyrus. Gyrus is there, central gyrus, precentral area for motor function, postcentral area for sensory function. Now, precentral area, which is responsible for this arm elevation or this arm contraction, going to fire. This is my brain. The proportionate brain is there when compared to head. This brain is very much proportionate. Spinal cord also proportionate. I have a large spinal cord when compared to brain. In the exam when your brain is very much small, spinal cord can be too much enlarged. You are trying to write the thing in the spinal cord level, not from the higher level. Here also same. Small brain is there, but this area is called precentral gyrus area, which is responsible for my left arm contraction. Now going to fire. Because of that stimulation of the precentral area, that impulse from the higher center come through your first order neuron, from cortex to brainstem. At the level of medulla oblongata, 85% of fibers, majority of the fibers cross into left side. Few of fibers, that means 15% of fibers descend in the same side. At the level of medulla oblongata, 85% of fiber going to cross into opposite side and 15% of fiber going to go through same side. But that 15% said, I will join with you at the level of spinal cord. 15% of fiber going to tail into 85% of fibers. At the level of spinal cord, I will going to join with you. The same thing happened at the level of spinal cord. That 15% of fiber is going to united with your 85% of fibers. Now you have second order neuron going to be started. Second order neuron nucleus situated here. Cell body also situated here. Axon here. The enlarged terminal is going to called as axon bulb. Enlarged terminal of the nerve fiber going to called as axon bulb. Once this nerve is stimulated, those stimulated impulse come through axon. Once those impulse come into your nerve terminal, what happened is your nerve terminal contain lot of calcium channel. Those calcium channel going to be stimulated. Because of that, calcium rapidly come from outside to inside. Once those calcium come into inside, here you are acetylcholine present in your nerve end. Within the vesicles. Here you are acetylcholine containing vesicles. This calcium can stimulate fusion of this vesicle into this membrane. Fusion and release of acetylcholine into this side. This side is called synaptic cleft. Now your synaptic cleft reaching acetylcholine neurotransmitters. Here you have specific receptors. Once acetylcholine bind to those receptors going to be stimulated. Because of that, we are going to call that receptors as acetylcholine receptors. Once acetylcholine bound to those receptors, acetylcholine receptors going to stimulate. Truly speaking, two acetylcholine molecules should bind into one receptors in order to stimulate the receptors. Once these receptors stimulated, this is here two acetylcholine molecule bind. Once these receptors stimulated, larger amount of sodium come into inside. Because cell have some kind of negative potential. How much of negative potential is there in your skeletal muscle cell right now? Yes, it's roughly about 90 millivolt. 90 millivolt negativity is there in your skeletal muscle right now. Now because of that negativity, sodium rapidly come into inside. That sodium depolarized your muscle membrane. That depolarization wave distribute through your this deeply situated tubule system as well. This look like T, because of that we are going to call it as T tubule. That depolarization wave is spread through the T tubule as well. Your T tubule containing calcium channel. With the depolarization, this calcium channel going to be stimulated. Because of that, calcium from outside to inside come rapidly. This calcium can trigger the release of calcium from sarcoplasmic reticulum. Your sarcoplasmic reticulum right now have larger amount of calcium. This outer calcium can stimulate your sarcoplasmic reticulum, and your sarcoplasmic reticulum now going to release larger amount of calcium. Then you release calcium massive amount from sarcoplasmic reticulum. These calcium go and bind your actin and myosin chain, and your muscle contraction will happen. That is what happened in my bicep muscle. I thought then my premotor cortex stimulated, which is responsible for left arm. Impulse travel through the brain. Once it come into medulla oblongata level, 85% fiber crossed into the opposite side, 15 came in the same side. At the level of spinal cord, they united together, stimulate my second order neuron. Then depolarization will go through my nerve. Once it come into nerve terminal, calcium come into inside, acetylcholine release, acetylcholine come into synaptic cleft, then depolarize muscle membrane. Once they depolarize the T tubule, calcium release, calcium trigger the release of calcium from the sarcoplasmic reticulum, then your actin and myosin stimulated and muscle contraction happen. Now my arm like this. I want to release this arm. To release this arm, my acetylcholine should be removed from muscle. From here, acetylcholine rapidly should remove. To remove the acetylcholine, there is an enzyme system. Which is responsible for removing of acetylcholine. Is called acetylcholine esterase enzyme. Acetylcholine esterase enzyme, which is the one responsible for removing of acetylcholine. What it does is, they break down acetylcholine into acetate and choline. They take choline again back into nerve terminal. They synthesize acetyl-CoA within the nerve terminal. If you remember your glycolysis, Krebs cycle and electron transfer chain, during the glycolysis process you produce lot of acetyl-CoA. That acetyl-CoA can be utilized for formation of acetylcholine. Choline taken from the breakdown product and your diet as well. So by that day you can create recreate acetylcholine there. Then I can relax my arm, because acetylcholine can rapidly remove by acetylcholine esterase enzyme. Then I went through the whole pathway in order to identify the pathophysiology of the myasthenia gravis. I went through the whole pathway. I didn't found any wrong thing in my brain cortex. I didn't found any wrong thing in my descending tracts. Those are called corticospinal tract. I didn't found any wrong thing in my second order neuron. I didn't found any wrong thing in calcium channel here for acetylcholine. They have enough calcium channels. They have enough acetylcholine storage there. Here also, only problem I found is lesser number of receptors when comparing to normal people. In the patient with myasthenia gravis, having lesser number of acetylcholine receptors when comparing to normal people. Then I went why it is due to. Then I want to find why it is due to, why that patient having lesser number of receptors. Then I found the antibody mediated receptor destruction was happening there. Antibody mediated receptor destruction is continuing. You know from which cell you produce antibodies in your body? From which cell you are going to produce antibodies? Yes, very good. Antibodies produced from plasma cells. Your B lymphocyte convert into plasma cells, and plasma cell is going to secrete various kind of antibodies. Here the responsible antibody is IgG. IgG mediated destruction of acetylcholine receptor is seen in patient with myasthenia gravis. If you want to correct 100%, you can say in patient with myasthenia gravis, IgG mediated nicotinic acetylcholine receptor destruction was happening in the skeletal muscles. Nicotinic acetylcholine receptor destruction happened in the skeletal muscles. Why I call it as nicotinic? We have two different kinds of acetylcholine receptors. Nicotinic acetylcholine receptors and muscarinic acetylcholine receptors. Your skeletal muscles always containing nicotinic acetylcholine receptors. That means if I take my bicep, it containing nicotinic acetylcholine receptor. If I take tricep, again nicotinic acetylcholine receptors. If I take these muscles, again nicotinic acetylcholine receptor. If I take hamstring muscles or bicep femoris muscles, it's again nicotinic acetylcholine muscle. Whatever the skeletal muscles, it containing nicotinic acetylcholine receptors. When coming to parasympathetic nervous system, parasympathetic nervous system containing preganglionic fiber and postganglionic fiber. Here it going to secrete acetylcholine as a neurotransmitter. Receptor is nicotinic. Here also they are going to secrete acetylcholine, but receptor muscarinic. When coming to parasympathetic nervous system. When coming to sympathetic nervous system, again preganglionic fiber, again postganglionic fiber. When coming to sympathetic nervous system, here acetylcholine is the neurotransmitter, receptor nicotine. Here the neurotransmitter noradrenaline, receptor alpha and beta receptors. But sympathetic supply to the sweat gland shows some kind of difference thing. Sympathetic supply to the sweat gland. Sympathetic supply to the sweat gland, here acetylcholine is the neurotransmitter, nicotine is the receptor. Here also they are going to release acetylcholine, not like noradrenaline. We have different kind of receptor in our body, muscarinic receptor and nicotinic receptor. The problem in the patient with myasthenia gravis is antibody mediated destruction of acetylcholine nicotinic receptor at the level of skeletal muscles. My patient with myasthenia gravis can easily identify by clinical picture because it has some kind of unique clinical picture. But I want to do some investigation in order to confirm the diagnosis. Can you do some investigation to confirm the diagnosis? Yes. Very good. You can measure the IgG level. You can measure the IgG level. Investigation to confirm the myasthenia gravis. You can do the immunoglobulin level or autoantibody level. Autoantibody level. If you detect autoantibody against the acetylcholine receptors, nicotinic acetylcholine receptors, you can say that your patient can have myasthenia gravis. Or what you can do further is, you can put electromyogram here. That means you electrically stimulate the nerve and you measure the strength of the muscle contraction. Strength of the muscle contraction. I put electrode into my bicep muscle in order to identify the length of muscle contraction. Then I am going to stimulate my nerve responsible for bicep contraction. I give same stimulus here. Then I am going to measure the strength of contraction here. With the repeated stimulus, what should happen? The contraction power should go down. The electromyogram also shows same picture. You can use it for diagnosis of myasthenia gravis. Electromyogram. Number 3. What I am going to do is now is, in the patient with myasthenia gravis, in the morning or at the beginning of the activity, they shows the enough muscle contraction. But with the repeated activity, the muscle contraction poor. That means in the beginning of the activity, they have enough acetylcholine here. They have higher amount of acetylcholine. Receptor here, now most of the receptor destructed, only 2 receptors there. 2 receptors. 2 together two receptors and enough amount of acetylcholine, you produce enough contraction. But with the time, what happens is amount of acetylcholine going to be reduced. Acetylcholine also going to be reduced. Receptor number more or less same, two receptors. Again, lesser number when compared to normal patients. When compared to normal people, lesser number of receptors, but when compared to morning and evening, same number of receptors there. With those two, they do not produce enough contraction, poor contraction. That means if you have enough acetylcholine at the neuromuscular junction, even though you have lesser number of receptors, it will able to produce enough contraction. It will able to produce enough contraction. Then what I am going to do is, I am going to inhibit this acetylcholine esterase enzyme. Then the breakdown of acetylcholine is going to be reduced. Breakdown of acetylcholine is going to be reduced. By that way, the amount of acetylcholine can increase at the neuromuscular junction. Increase acetylcholine. Then that patient should show the improvement, because now even though they have lesser number of receptors, they have enough acetylcholine. Because of that, that patient should show some kind of improvement. For that, I am going to use some kind of drug which is going to inhibit the acetylcholine esterase. Acetylcholine esterase inhibitors I can use. Acetylcholine esterase inhibitors. I want to diagnose the disease. Because of that, I am going to give short-acting acetylcholine esterase inhibitor. If I go to give long-acting one, if patient does not have disease, it will be problematic. If I give short-acting, it again will be problematic but short-lasting. So acetylcholine esterase inhibitors called edroponium. After giving edroponium, what happens is my muscle power gradually increase. Initially, when I close the eye, it gradually goes down, diminish. Then I give edroponium to me. Then again muscle power increase. By that way, you can identify your patient whether your patient having myasthenia gravis or not. You can give edroponium. The test is called Tensilon test. Tensilon test. In the morning also, when your mother come and touch you, get up. Your edroponium also little bit come into your eye. You can open eye with that Tensilon test. But when mother is not more there, again go back to normal. The same thing happened here. You give short-acting drugs, edroponium. Short term, you show improvement of the symptom. After that, it will again reappear. Symptoms again reappear. If so, you can give long-acting drugs, long-acting acetylcholine esterase inhibitor, in order to improve the patient. In order to improve the patient, you can give long-acting acetylcholine esterase inhibitor. Before I am moving into drugs, I want to find what are the major clinical features. Associated with myasthenia gravis. What are the major clinical features associated with myasthenia gravis? If this involved in the respiratory muscles, what happens is, for a while you think this is external intercostal muscle, which is responsible for your bucket handle movement or increase of the thoracic cavity lateral diameter and AP diameter, bucket handle and pump handle movement. If it is involved in the respiratory muscles, what happens is, with the time your respiratory function goes down. Your tidal volume going to be reduced. And if somebody asks forcefully expirate you, right now I can do it like that. But in patient with myasthenia gravis, can't do that. So because of that, their force vital capacity goes down. Force vital capacity goes down. Their cough reflex also goes down. I can nicely cough. It is not nice. I have to wear a mask in those days. But in patient with myasthenia gravis, the cough reflex is going to be poor because the contraction power of the muscle is going to be low. Not only that, with the supine position, your abdominal content come into upside. Because of that, diaphragm also a little bit sprinting. Because of that, you may feel some kind of discomfort in the supine position. You can have some kind of hypoxia in the supine position. Difficult to tolerate the supine position. Difficult to tolerate supine position. They have some kind of restrictive lung disease. If your respiratory system involved with the myasthenia gravis, if you have a patient with respiratory system involved, they can have low tidal volume, they can have low forced vital capacity, they can have poor cough reflex, they can have difficulty in tolerating the supine position, they can have restrictive type lung disease. If your patient have symptom of degglutination and mastications, that means mastication, muscles of mastication is also involved and the muscles of deglutition also involved. What happens is the mastication power also goes down, the degglutination function also goes down. When coming to GI, what happens is mastication goes down, deglutition goes down. Not only that, because of that poor degglutination, the reflux also can happen. Reflux, especially in patient under anesthesia or under light anesthesia, if due to some reason, if gastric material come into esophagus, they can't swallow it nicely. Because of that, your patient can end up with pulmonary aspiration, reflux and aspiration. Number 3, myasthenia gravis and symptom rarely can contribute with autonomic features. They can have poor gastric emptying, poor. They can have cardiovascular symptoms. CVS instability, they can have CVS instability. That means with your laryngoscope, patient can produce very high blood pressure fluctuation. With your spinal anesthesia, patient can have very low blood pressure. That means blood pressure fluctuation you can see in patient with myasthenia gravis. In addition to that, they may show poor response to fluid. Not like other patients. Even though you give larger amount of fluid, they did not show much improvement. Not only that, if you are going to give some ephedrine because of poor response, it may shows very high response. They have very high response to direct acting sympathomimetic. Your ephedrine is some kind of direct and indirect acting sympathomimetic. Your noradrenaline is some kind of direct acting sympathomimetic. If you are going to give such kind of thing, your patient can have very, very unreliable value. That means very, very high value. Those are the major clinical features which is relevant to anesthesia. Or in patient with myasthenia gravis. Number 1, respiratory wise, they can have low tidal volume, they can have less forced vital capacity, they can have poor cough reflex, difficult tolerating supine position, restrictive lung disease, muscles of mastication can affected and degglutination also affected, and GI gastric emptying reduce and increase the risk of reflux there because of less emptying. Serious instability is there and poor response to IV fluid. Not only that, you have erratic response to your direct acting sympathomimetic substance. Direct acting sympathomimetic substance. Now I am going to treat in patient with myasthenia gravis. These are the response, these are the clinical features you can easily see in your patients. Now I am going to treat my patients. As I told earlier, like in the edroponium test or tensilon test, I can give long-acting acetylcholine esterase inhibitor. I can give long-acting acetylcholine esterase inhibitors. Esterase inhibitor. Like pisiostigmine, pyridostigmine, neostigmine. Pisiostigmine, pyridostigmine and neostigmine. Those drugs going to inhibit your acetylcholine esterase enzyme. Because of that, your neuromuscular junction now reaching in acetylcholine enzyme. Because of that, you can produce enough action. Number 2, this is some kind of autoimmune disease. You can give steroid. You can give steroid. You can give immunosuppression to your patient. You can do immunosuppression. Acetylcholine, cyclosporine, mycophenolate. Mycophenolate. You can give acetylcholine, you can give cyclosporine, you can give mycophenolate to your patients. I am happily started physiostigmine to my patient. After that, patient improved nicely. What I did is, I found a patient with myasthenia gravis, had vast clinical features. I started physiostigmine, acetylcholine esterase inhibitor, but unfortunately, initially my patient showed much more improvement, but after some time, my patient developed again clinical features very similar to reappearance of the myasthenia gravis, even with the drugs. While continuing on the drugs, my patient again showed the symptom of myasthenia gravis. Then I went through what happened to my patients. Are there any poor compliance of my patients? This is my patient. I started physiostigmine. Patient improved nicely. Again deteriorate. Improve nicely, again deteriorate. The deterioration may be due to further antibody mediated receptor destruction. Because of that, my drug doses may not be enough, or sometime totally drug failure, expired drugs, or patient did not take drugs. In that case, my patient may have developed myasthenic crisis. Myasthenic crisis. Or once I give larger amount of neostigmine to my patient, physiostigmine to my patient, lot of acetylcholine receptors block here, acetylcholine esterase enzyme block here. Because of that, larger amount of acetylcholine here continuously stimulate my muscles. Because of that, my muscles further can't stimulate, now show some kind of flaccid paralysis. I will repeat it again. If I give larger amount of physiostigmine to my patient, it will heavily block my acetylcholine esterase enzyme. Because of that, no more breakdown of acetylcholine. Because of that, acetylcholine will appear in neuromuscular junction. Not only neuromuscular junction, acetylcholine appear in the preganglionic parasympathetic fiber as well. Larger amount of acetylcholine. Postganglionic also acetylcholine. Acetylcholine largely appear in the pre and postganglionic level. In addition to that, neuromuscular junction. Because of that large amount of acetylcholine, it chronically stimulate my acetylcholine receptors. Now acetylcholine receptor also think they are chronically stimulate me. I should not stimulate with that chronically stimulate. Because of that, it underwent a phase called depolarization type flaccid paralysis. Depolarization type flaccid paralysis, also going to called as cholinergic crisis. My patient initially improved but deteriorated. I don't know whether it is due to myasthenic crisis or cholinergic crisis, because the first clinical feature in the myasthenic crisis is paralysis or muscle weakness. Rather than paralysis, best term is muscle weakness. Muscle weakness. Here also, first clinical feature is muscle weakness. Here it is flaccid type muscle weakness. Then I want to differentiate myasthenic crisis from cholinergic crisis. Why? If my patient having myasthenic crisis due to inadequate physiostigmine or not taken physiostigmine, I should treat this patient with physiostigmine. If my patient develop cholinergic crisis, that is due to excess drug dose, I should reduce the physiostigmine dose. So because of that, I want to differentiate those two conditions very clearly. In patient with myasthenic crisis, they shows the muscle weakness and ptosis. Ptosis means partial closure of your eyes, called placid or complete closure of your eye. They shows features of ptosis and muscle weakness. Here this patient also shows ptosis, but ptosis is not that much significant in patient with cholinergic crisis. In addition to that, because of additional cholinergic stimulation, I already told, parasympathetic cholinergic system also now going to be stimulated. Because of that, this patient can have small pupil, or pupillary contraction. With the parasympathetic stimulation, pupil going to be small. With the sympathetic stimulation, pupil enlarge. When coming to respiratory system, you can have a lot of secretion, nasal secretions, rhinorrhea, and bronchial secretions, bronchoria, rhinorrhea, bronchoria. Sometimes excessive acetylcholine can stimulate bronchospasm. You can have bronchospasm even. Excessive stimulation of your parasympathetic nervous system in the heart and the cardiovascular system, you can have bradycardia and hypotension. Bradycardia and hypotension. GI stimulation of the parasympathetic system, you can have high GI secretion. High GI secretions. You can have diarrhea. You can have abdominal cramp. You can have diarrhea, abdominal cramp. When coming to genitourinary system, you can have incontinence as well. Incontinence. Here, only the main feature is muscle weakness with the ptosis. But here, the collection of the cholinergic symptom was there. Number one, muscle flaccid type of paralysis, small fused pupils, pupil constriction, rhinorrhea, bronchoria and bronchospasm, bradycardia and hypotension, and high GI secretions, and sometimes patient can have urinary incontinence as well. So it is worth to, you should identify the difference between the cholinergic crisis and myasthenic crisis. Why? The treatment is totally different. Due to some reasons, if you are not able to identify those clinical features properly, what you can do? In that case, you can give again short acting acetylcholinesterase inhibitor. Short acting. If your patient having myasthenic crisis, patient should show improvement. If your patient having cholinergic crisis, patient should show deterioration. But you give very short or ultra short acting acetylcholinesterase inhibitor. Because of that, the symptom will be very short lasting. That symptom will be very short lasting. That is all regarding the management and identification of pathophysiology of myasthenia gravis. Now I am going to cross-link myasthenia gravis and pregnancy together. Now I am going to cross-link myasthenia gravis and pregnancy together. I have come across with pregnant patient. This is the tummy. Picture is not that much beautiful, totally ugly. This is the pregnant woman, came with a 37 week of POA. 37 week of POA. What is the meaning of POA? Period of amenorrhea. That means 37 week of pregnancy, patient came with the myasthenia gravis. What I should do? If this patient came in the early pregnancy, that means immediately after conception. If this patient was on neostigmine or physiostigmine or acetylcholinesterase, any kind of acetylcholinesterase inhibitor, I would like to continue. Ask patient to continue it. If this patient on steroid, I would ask to continue because those two drugs are innocent in pregnancy. But if my patient was on immunosuppression, like cyclosporine, mycophenolate, I would stop. Acetylcholine, cyclosporine and mycophenolate, I would stop because it carries risk of teratogenicity and abortion. So I would like to continue neostigmine and steroid. But with the pregnancy, what happened is, they have increased plasmodium. Not only that, increase acetylcholinesterase enzyme activity. They can have increased glomerular filtration rate. Because of that, not only that, because of that, the drug removal from the body is enhanced. You may have to increase the physiostigmine dose. Not only that, during the early pregnant period, what happened is they may have hyperemesis. With that, this kind of oral drugs, the effectiveness of the drug will be reduced. In that case, you may have to consider IV physiostigmine or IV neostigmine or IV pyridoxigmine in order to improve the compliance. So the initial problem associated with pregnancy is you have to stop some kind of drugs, that means immunosuppression, because it carries risk of teratogenicity. After that, you may have to increase the drug dose. Sometimes you may have to convert into IV preparation as well. Then this patient should undergo delivery somehow. Who want to deliver this baby normal vaginally? Yes, he want to deliver this patient normal vaginally. Who want to deliver this patient normal vaginally with the assisted technique? Yes, anyone? Yes, he willing to do the normal vaginal delivery with the assisted technique. Who want to do this patient delivery under spinal anesthesia with the cesarean section or epidural plus cesarean section? Yes, he want to deliver this child with the spinal anesthesia, cesarean section delivery. Who want to deliver this child under GA? Yes, anyone? If you are a neuroaxial technique contraindicated, definitely you have to go general anesthesia in order to deliver this child operatively. Yes, if anybody does not like to do general anesthesia with this mother, I will consider of giving general anesthesia to this patient. So this is your mother. I am going to give here. I am going to give nothing, going to give just normal vaginal delivery. Normal vaginal delivery. Here I am going to give normal vaginal delivery, but assisted second stage. You know second stage mean what is? First stage mean from the beginning of uterine contraction to fully cervical dilatation. Second stage mean fully cervical dilation to delivery of the child. Third stage mean after delivery of the child to delivery of the placenta. The time period after delivery of the child to delivery of the placenta. That means after fully dilation, you should have some kind of assistance in order to deliver the child here. Here I am going to deliver the child. This is delivery. Here I am going to deliver the child with epidural plus assisted second stage. Here I am going to deliver the child with epidural or spinal with LSCS, lower segment cesarean section. Here I am going to give general anesthesia for my patient. General anesthesia for my patient. I already told my patient may need to have higher dose in pregnancy. Usually in pregnancy nothing will happen in the first trimester usually. The second, third trimester you may have to increase the dose because plasma volume expansion and the increase the plasma cholinesterase activity can be seen in the most of the time second, third trimester. If I want to give normal vaginal delivery, any kind of treatment here, I should go through the patient history carefully. I should go through the patient history carefully, and I should find the respiratory involvement of the patient. Respiratory involvement of the patient. My main aim is to identify the respiratory involvement. If my patient having huge respiratory involvement and marginal respiratory function of the patient, even with the normal vaginal delivery, even with the cesarean section under spinal anesthesia, even with the general anesthesia technique, respiratory compromisation can happen. With that, patient deterioration will happen. In that case, you may have to have some kind of HDU care or post-op ventilatory care in order to save the patient. So, before going into any kind of things, normal vaginal delivery or this any kind of thing, you should assess patient respiratory function. You have to do respiratory function assessment. Lung function test. You have to do lung function test. You have to assess what is the patient capacity of lung function right now. After that, you should avoid sedative premedications for your patient. You should avoid sedative premedication. Why? Avoid sedative premedication. Why? Those sedative premedications can further reduce your respiratory drive. Third one, you should optimally fluid fill your patient. Fluid status of your patient should be optimized. Why? I already told the autonomic system involvement of the myasthenia gravis is very minimal. Most of the patient, the involvement will happen in the skeletal muscles, but rarely few of patients can have autonomic involvement with the myasthenia gravis. In that case, if you not give adequate amount of fluid, your patient can develop severe hypotension. So you have to assess the respiratory function, you have to avoid the sedative premedication, you should optimize the fluid status of your patients. Then we will go into your normal vaginal delivery. The problem associated with the normal vaginal delivery is uterine contraction happen without any problem and until fully cervical dilatation. Why? Your uterus containing smooth muscles. Smooth muscle function does not affect with your myasthenia gravis. That means first stage from the beginning of the muscle contraction to uterine contraction to fully cervical dilatation can happen without any problem. But with that, mother feel pain. When mother feel pain, mother start to hyperventilate. With that, muscle failure or respiratory failure can develop. First stage, unaffected, but muscle failure can occur. To the second stage, mother pushing is necessary. Mother has to contract the abdomen and mother has to push as much as possible in order to reduce the duration of the second stage. It will be hugely affect if you are going to do normal vaginal delivery. Second stage, muscle contraction poor, because of that prolonged second stage, sometimes failed second stage can happen. Third stage, you can manage third stage mean the placental until placental delivery after child delivery. Then we will move on to the normal vaginal delivery with assisted second stage. For the assisted of the second stage, you can do forceps delivery or vacuum delivery. That means the muscle contraction or mother muscle power, you need less mother muscle power in order to process the second stage, in order to continue the second stage. It will be little bit good than the normal vaginal delivery. First stage, same way happen. Second stage, you do a vacuum delivery or forceps delivery. Less mother support is need for this one, less mother support. Because of that, you can preserve the mother muscle power. You need lesser mother power. Number third, epidural with assisted second stage. Epidural with assisted second stage. It will minimize the pain. Because of that, as I told earlier, during the first stage, because of the pain, no pain now. Because of that, no respiratory deterioration now. But you have to carefully adjust the epidural. If you are going to do a normal vaginal delivery, T10 level is enough with the epidural. If you want to do cesarean section with epidural, you should have T4 level. With the T4 level, what happens is your respiratory function can further reduce. Because now part of the muscle already blocked by your epidural or neuroaxial line. Rest function also not properly because of the neuromuscular disorder or myasthenia gravis. Because of that, your patient can develop respiratory failure during the surgery or after surgery. Your patient may need ventilatory support. So here, epidural plus assisted delivery, normal vaginal delivery. Epidural level T10 is enough. Assisted second stage. No need mother support that much. Because of that, this may be much of better option when compared to these three. If possible, this must be the better option. Here, epidural or spinal anesthesia and cesarean section. You have to block up to T4. It will be danger, one thing. Number two, even with the spinal and epidural, here you have to block larger amount of sympathetic and parasympathetic fiber as well. Because of that, your patient can develop hypotension. I already told, in patient with myasthenia gravis, rarely can show the features of autonomic dysfunction. Because of that, your patient can develop hypotension. But you have to carefully titrate the fluid status and inotrope in this patient. You may have to continue left lateral tilt throughout the surgery. You have to feel your patient properly to prevent the supine hypotension syndrome. You have to add some kind of vasopressors to your patients. So, epidural and surgery is fine. Here the general anesthesia. The problem associated with general anesthesia is intubation and extubation. You should avoid sedative premedication, as I told previously. Sedative premedication should avoid. Sedative premedication you should avoid. Number two, you should properly feel your patient. You should optimize fluid status and you should maintain left lateral position, left lateral tilt. in order to prevent the supine hypotension syndrome. Number 3, you should avoid succinylcholine. Actually speaking, succinylcholine is contraindicated in patients with myasthenia gravis. Avoid, contraindicate succinylcholine. You have to do rapid sequence induction with trocuronium. Modified rapid sequence induction with trocuronium. Succinylcholine contraindicated. Anyone? Why is that? Yes. In patient with myasthenia gravis, they can have larger amount of extrajunctional acetylcholine receptors. With your succinylcholine, those extrajunctional acetylcholine receptors can stimulate. Because of that, your patient develop larger amount of potassium in their circulation. Sometimes can go into cardiac arrest even. Because of that, succinylcholine contraindicated. You have to start trocuronium. You can continue rocuronium or atracurium. Here. You have to avoid or you have to minimize long-acting opioid. Why? Those opioids can cause respiratory depression. Post-operatively, you may have to ventilate in that case. Minimize opioid. You have to book ICU, STU. Your patient may need post-operative invasive ventilation or non-invasive ventilation. Your patient having higher risk of aspiration, because I already told the myasthenia can associated with autonomic dysfunction, degglutination, dysfunction. Even though your patient awake, if your patient reaching or vomiting happen, they can't swallow it properly. They can aspirate into pulmonary tree. Your patient can develop aspiration pneumonia. Because of that, you may have to take some precautions. You may have to give citrate solution to your patient. You may have to give citrate to your patient. You may have to give some kind of antiemetic, but some antiemetic are not good in patient with myasthenia gravis. I will tell later. Reversal of muscle relaxation, one of the major challenge. Even though you give atracurium, you are not going to give normal dose to this patient. Induction dose 0.5 mg per kilogram, and the repeated dose is 1/3 of that every 20 to 30 minutes. I am not going to give that much of atracurium here. I am only going to give 1/10 of normal dose into this patient. Recovery from the neuromuscular agent. If I give atracurium to my patient, I will allow to spontaneous recovery. I can allow spontaneous recovery because atracurium undergo a process called Hoffmann degeneration. Who going to define Hoffmann degeneration for me? Yes. Hoffmann degeneration means with the temperature and pH, the drugs gradually break down. With the temperature and pH, gradually break down. They create atracurium molecule in such a way with a lot of polar part in the outer side. Because of that, then molecule travel through those chemically different environment. They try to make different bond with the other substance. Because of that, that molecule is rapidly break down. Those called Hoffmann degeneration. Here also atracurium going into Hoffmann degeneration. Because of that, we can wait until all the atracurium going to be destroyed. Or you can give neostigmine carefully. Why you should give neostigmine carefully? If you give excessive dose, you can create cholinergic crisis on your patients. You can create cholinergic crisis, as I told earlier. Larger amount of neostigmine, physiostigmine, pyridoxigmine can create cholinergic crisis. So if you give atracurium, you can allow spontaneous recovery, or you can give neostigmine. If you give rocuronium, you can safely reverse with sugammadex. If you give rocuronium, you can safely reverse with sugamatics. So after that, your patient should send it to ICU. Then you have to do arterial blood gas analysis and identify whether your patient having adequate respiratory drive in order to maintain the saturation. If your patient does not have adequate respiratory drive, what you should do? You have to do invasive ventilation or non-invasive ventilation until patient improved. After that, I am going to tell what are the drugs you should avoid in patient with myasthenia gravis. What are the drugs you should avoid in patient with myasthenia gravis? Calcium channel blocker. Calcium channel blocker block the calcium entry of your T-tubule mediated calcium entry, as I told earlier. Because of that, we are going to avoid calcium channel blocker in long-term use in patient with myasthenia gravis. Number 1, avoid calcium channel blocker, especially nifedipine long-term use. Number 2, you have to avoid H2 receptor blockers. I told here we are going to give citrate to my patient. We are going to give citrate to my patient. I am not going to give H2 receptor blockers to my patient. Ranitidine or Maxolone. Maxolone is not a H2 receptor blockers. Thank you for knowing it. I am not going to give ranitidine or famotidine to my patient. It found to have, it enhances the effect of myasthenia gravis. It enhances the effect of myasthenia gravis. Number 3, aminoglycoside. Aminoglycoside or gentamicin mainly we should avoid in patient with myasthenia gravis. Why? Gentamicin inhibits the presynaptic calcium entry and the postsynaptic magnesium assay. Because of that, release of acetylcholine. If you remember my nerve terminal, release of if you are going to block the calcium entry, the release of acetylcholine is going to be reduced. So aminoglycoside reduces the acetylcholine release, and aminoglycoside reduces the acetylcholine activity at the neuromuscular junction. Because of that, we are not going to do aminoglycoside in patient with myasthenia gravis. Number 3. Number 4 is macrolide. Macrolide antibiotic also you should avoid. Fortunately, they didn't found the reason for that. Otherwise, we have to keep that one also in our mind. Very good. Number 4. Number 5. Most of the anti-epileptic block your sodium channel. Some of them are block your calcium channel. By blocking sodium and calcium channel, your muscles and the nerves can be further hypopolarized. Because of that, we are going to avoid much of anti-epileptic in patient with myasthenia gravis. You may have to give anti-epileptic if your patient having epilepsy, but you have to be extremely careful. Number 6, magnesium sulfate. Truly speaking, magnesium sulfate contraindicated in patient with myasthenia gravis. Magnesium sulfate or magnesium is natural antagonist of your calcium. It will block your calcium entry into the nerve terminal. Because of that, it reduces the acetylcholine release. Because of that, you may feel further flaccid paralysis, feature of further paralysis. Because of that, you should avoid magnesium sulfate. The drug should avoid in patient with myasthenia gravis. Here, the succinylcholine also I should add. Succinylcholine. These two considered as contraindication. So the drug should avoid in patient with myasthenia gravis is calcium channel blockers, H2 receptor blockers, aminoglycoside, macrolide, anti-epileptic, and magnesium sulfate and succinylcholine. That is all regarding the management of patient with myasthenia gravis, especially in the pregnancy. The best option if you can do in patient with pregnancy is epidural anesthesia with epidural analgesia with assisted second stage. Thank you very much.